So thanks all of you for joining us today. We're going to do two main things here. We want to talk about everything we accomplished in 2020, sort of a live impact report, but we're also really excited to get your viewpoints on 2021 and what we may all wish to do together to make an impact. So for this first section, we're going to be going through it at a pretty good clip because we really do want to get to the conversation. We do invite your participation, or if you have questions, please feel free to stop me and let me know. We are recording this. So this first section, that is the 2020 impact report. We are going to be sharing that with some folks that were unable to attend today, but the conversation, we're just going to keep that part for ourselves. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So I want to start by talking about, what was Business for America all about? And you may have seen this slogan that we've used: democracy is good for business. And now business can be good for democracy too. Of course, with corporate social impact becoming a bigger initiative and people talking about stakeholder capitalism, we've been asking ourselves, how can we mobilize businesses and give them meaningful activities to have an impact? That meant one thing in 2020, an election year, and of course, it's going to mean something even greater going forward. But at its essence, we have a belief that the interests of the business community and the interests of the public are aligned in having a well-functioning democracy. And of course, that is on a variety of levels. It's how we run our elections. It is how our government operates and how policy is made, and the kind of dialogue we see in our political campaigns, and just our overall, the civil dialogue out there about how we move forward together as a country. So we're going to see how all these pieces fit together as we go through this conversation. So let's get right into it. This is our 2020 review. So we're going to get through just our main initiatives, our big ones. And those are, of course, our partnership with Time to Vote, the work we did in Pennsylvania, our Vote Safe letter to Congress, Operation Vote Safe, the national effort that we did for Election Day. And of course, we've got still some more work to do in Georgia. So we'll cover that as well. Starting at the top of the line here with Time to Vote and the partnerships that we formed there. You may remember it started back in 2018, and in 2019, we started the conversation with Patagonia, Levi's, and PayPal to say, how can Business for America help support you in this initiative? We want to help educate the business community, reach parts of the business community that you haven't been able to reach in the prior year, and help bring in more businesses and make a bigger splash. And so we worked with the team to help educate. We were able to recruit a number of top brands and a lot of smaller businesses as well, and including reaching through a network of business organizations that are partners. And just as a quick anecdote, it was pretty fun. The week that we were able to help bring PepsiCo in was the same week that Coca-Cola joined. And we thought that was kind of neat how that all worked out. So in case you didn't see, there were almost 2,000 companies that joined the Time to Vote initiative, and just really pretty incredible to think about how businesses are now taking accountability for their employees participating in the civic process and having a voice in government. I thought that was really pretty amazing. Jen Swain, our guest speaker, let me hand the mic to you first.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sarah. I'm Jen Swain. I'm the Director of Global Sustainability for Burton Snowboards. We're based in Burlington, Vermont area. Burton's history of civic engagement really began in earnest in 2018 with Time to Vote. We've been offering paid time off to vote in local, state, and federal elections since the US midterms that year. We're registering our community to vote and pushing out resources to our community through standard marketing channels. But in 2020, with the pandemic, the impacts on, the economy, as well as our ability to ensure safe and secure elections, led us to really up our efforts. So as part of our larger Fight for the Future campaign, we got involved with Business for America starting in July. And this is the first time that we had really stepped into the advocacy side for promoting a healthy democracy. So we've been working on advocacy for climate action in particular since 2013, but we aren't as well versed in how to talk about building a healthy democracy. So what we see, we worked with about 7 unique organizations for our overall elections campaign. And what we saw, the really unique value that Business for America brought was in particular on the advocacy side, really knowing who to talk with, how to talk about the issues, and making sure that we can get in front of the right people to make positive influence as businesses on policy. And then the other thing that I think was really helpful, that was kind of Vote Safe 2020. And then talking about Operation Vote Safe, we were able to donate over 1,000 units of PPE, including face masks that we manufactured at our bindings facility here in Vermont, as well as KN95s. And we have connections in our local community here where we're headquartered, but actually the state of Vermont already was full up on PPE, thankfully, for our election workers at that time. So it was really helpful to work with Richard and the team to figure out how to put our resources to best use on the national scale, and make sure that we were really supporting people throughout the communities in the United States. So we're really grateful to work with you all kind of throughout the campaign, and looking forward to hearing what you're doing in 2021. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jen. I really appreciate that. And just actually really quickly, if you would, 30 seconds on, how was that received by your employees?
Everything was very well received. I think I actually think a lot of the work that we do in sustainability, when it comes through, it's not as much able to engage employees outside of kind of our products and sourcing. And so we saw that this was an effort where we were really showing that we as a company were supporting not only our employees, as we already do for elections, but the broader community. And what we're hearing from both employees and customers, and looking at research reports that are coming out, are especially because of the pandemic, people care even more about companies that are taking responsibility for the broader local communities where they're operating, and that is inclusive of taking care of our employees' health, safety, and issues like employment and compensation. So it tied right into, I think, the direction that corporate responsibility is heading, especially in the near future.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Thanks for helping us wrap up the section on time to vote and giving us a broader perspective as well. So great. Well, now we are ready for Pennsylvania. Richard,
Okay,
take it away.
great, good. And thanks, Jen. So the work we did in Pennsylvania in 2020 is indicative of a larger strategy we have to engage at the state level and try to bring about policy change that increases competition within the political process and addresses some of the fundamental problems and challenges that government has when it comes to running elections and ensuring that all voters can participate in the process. So Sarah, if you could go to the next slide, thank you. So the theory here is that we need to work both at the federal and state level, and we're going to talk about our activity at the federal level in a few moments. But at the state level, there is probably more opportunity to bring about structural change. So Pennsylvania is an interesting example, and with support from the Heinz Endowment Foundation, which is based in Pittsburgh, we were able to build a statewide coalition of dozens of companies, mostly small and mid-sized businesses across the state, who recognize that the level of dysfunction in Pennsylvania's election system at that point was jeopardizing their economic prosperity and the overall health of the economy. So that's a theme that we made clear, and that was our central argument, that businesses care about political reform, nonpartisan political reform, because it's really good for business and good for the overall health of the economy, and also would help stabilize the overall societal thinking about elections. So as you might remember, Pennsylvania was one of the states identified after the 2016 election as being particularly vulnerable to hacking, and they were using old equipment, and there were a series of dysfunctional systems in place. So several bills were introduced, Act 77 and Act 12, during 2019 and 2020, which made some serious reforms, including the adoption of no excuse mail-in balloting. And what's remarkable is that foresight to allow more people to vote by mail preceded anyone knowing about the pandemic. So it's a really good thing that the Pennsylvania legislature, both Republicans and Democrats, thought this was a necessary step to just enfranchise more people. And if they hadn't have passed that bill, who knows what the outcome might have been in Pennsylvania. So we were able to weigh in on a number of important occasions with the state legislature. Our colleague there, Steve Masters, who's on the phone, was very helpful in moving things along in terms of those large, comprehensive pieces of legislation. And then in a more nuanced way, we also weighed in on two pieces of other legislation. One was about open primaries, which, as you may know, would do away with the requirement that you have to be registered as a Democrat or Republican in order to vote in the primary. And in Pennsylvania, there are about 800,000 voters, at least 800,000 that are registered as independents and historically don't get to participate in the primary process, which is funded by taxpayers. So many people, including us, believe that that really discriminates against voters and tends to solidify the power of the two political parties, which doesn't necessarily lead to a competitive political landscape. So we worked on that and also worked on the fair districting issue. And then finally, our work in Pennsylvania shifted a bit in the sort of May timeframe to recognize that, like in many states, Pennsylvania was going to need help getting people educated on the changes that these two pieces of legislation, Act 77 and Act 12, had brought about. So we began to organize what we called a Ready to Vote campaign, which educated businesses about these changes and encouraged them to pass that information along to their employees. And that led to Operation Vote Safe. And then finally, in Pennsylvania, just last month, as things began to become very uncertain about the post-election situation and whether the will of the voters would be accepted, we wrote a letter to the House and Senate leadership encouraging them to actually abide by existing rules and law and respect the will of the voters, which eventually led to the vote being certified by the Secretary of State. And then that in part took off the table the debate in Pennsylvania about whether the lawsuits would continue. So next slide, Sarah. So that's kind of an overview of the work at the state level, okay? And then moving to the federal level on the policy front, as a number of you are aware, there was a debate in Congress, and you can go to the next slide, a debate in Congress all throughout 2020 about whether the states needed or deserved more money in order to run their elections in a safe and secure way. And unfortunately, this became a very partisan issue with debate about how much money was necessary, whether any money was necessary, whether it was the federal government's responsibility. And our basic position was that given the spreading impact, the negative spreading impact of the virus on the economy, that states actually needed money to upgrade their infrastructure, and those funds that we were calling for Congress to allocate would be spent by the states in a wise and prudent manner. So we mobilized 270 companies, large and small businesses. You can go to the next slide, to call for Congress to allocate funds that would be distributed to the states. And that effort, in many ways, was really unprecedented. We couldn't find evidence of any such large-scale effort historically, where so many companies stepped up to support a functional election infrastructure and improvements to the process, and doing it in really a totally nonpartisan way, where the motivation for the companies was just to ensure that their employees and other stakeholders and customers would be able to vote in a safe way, and that no one had to put their health at risk in order to vote. And along that journey, and the next slide, Sarah, thank you, we realized that we really needed to touch in with a number of ranking Republican members in the Senate. And the Senate Rules Committee, which is chaired by Senator Roy Blunt from Missouri, they had jurisdiction over this funding issue. So we set up meetings with 4 Republican Senate offices, and in 3 of the cases with Rubio, Gardner, and Toomey. Toomey's from Pennsylvania, Gardner from Colorado, recently lost his bid for re-election, and Rubio in Florida. Those 3 offices we met with staff and described the business case for providing this additional funding. And then in the case of Senator Blunt, we met, this was all virtual. He was on the phone with us, and we gathered together a large number of companies, as well as in his case, 2 chambers of commerce. And although the bill did not succeed in getting out of Congress, and Congress subsequently did not provide any additional funding to the states, I think it really set a precedent, and really, as Jen noted, gave credence to the argument that business cared about election integrity and election safety. And I'm going to ask Jesse Sneath from Warby Parker, who was on a number of those calls, I think maybe 3 of those calls, Jesse, if I'm remembering correctly, to say a few words about your experience on those advocacy related calls.
Sure. Thanks, Richard. So I think a couple of things. We were really excited to have the opportunity to kind of take further action beyond signing the Vote Safe letter. So we kind of seized the opportunity to participate on these calls. Warby Parker is headquartered in New York City with several hundred employees, and we have a lot of strong relationships with policy leaders within New York State. But while we have 130 stores across the country, our network and connections to policymakers across the country isn't as strong. And so we are really grateful for BFA to facilitate these conversations. We were really excited to be part of a group of businesses that we hadn't normally kind of partnered with. And so BFA did a really strong job of pulling together a diverse group of businesses, but we all shared this kind of collective perspective. So I think that was really powerful in these conversations. I think, advocating for policy changes, it's sometimes hard to see the impact and really understand the efficacy of that work. But a particular moment was really exciting when Senator Blunt said he was very gracious and excited to hear our perspective, and he literally ended the call with, "I'm going to go talk to Mitch McConnell." And so that chain of action was so exciting. So yeah, really grateful for these opportunities this summer, and again, big hat tip to BFA for coordinating.
Great, thank you, Jesse. Yeah, and it was great to hear Senator Blunt say he was going to go talk to Mitch McConnell, who unfortunately didn't listen to Senator Blunt. But I think the real takeaway from that experience for all of us was that while businesses weigh in on all types of issues, right, on tax policy, climate, healthcare, immigration, bringing companies to the table to talk about election integrity, election safety, a healthy democracy, really caught the attention of the elected officials, and they appreciated hearing that point of view that we all offered. Okay, next slide. Thank you.
Right, great. Thank you so much, Richard. And we're going to move on to Operation Vote Safe, which has been keeping us all pretty occupied for the last several months. So as the opportunity to get funding started to become vanishingly unlikely to happen, we started to shift our efforts. And Richard and I were actually in a conversation with the Secretary of State of Washington, Kim Wyman, about how we might be able to provide assistance there and the scenario for them in light of short funding. And she was the one who brought to mind, this is, gosh, it was the first half of this year, like, what can the business community do really in terms of offering product and helping to recruit poll workers and do all these other kinds of things. So that is how Operation Vote Safe was born. Now we saw the effort kind of focused in two areas, really started out with this idea of election support. And that was about helping secretaries of state and county election officials to get the things that they needed to get in order to make the operation happen. Focus initially was on product, and we were thinking about PPE and equipment and other supplies, mail-in drop boxes, but it also started to become also about voter information and helping to get out the vote, mobilizing poll workers, and a whole bunch of mishmash of really cool activities that help make an impact. And then as we started to get closer to election day, we spent more time investing in voter support and these get out the vote efforts with community groups, nonpartisan community groups that were doing everything they could to make sure that voters had what they needed once they got to the polls to be safe. So here are the results. So we were operating in 26 states and the District of Columbia. That included secretaries of state in 6 states. We got donations from over 50 businesses, contributions both in terms of product and services and staff time. We built an interactive United States map that where people could see where there were needs and figure out where their contribution could make a difference. And we also set up an online PPE marketplace where you could actually purchase PPE and have it sent directly to the area of need. In the end, we mobilized more than $2 million in goods and services. Really proud of those results and making the impact. And that included product going to over 50 local Get Out the Vote groups and Native American communities that benefited from this assistance. So really thankful to all the companies that made a contribution, large and small, companies that didn't have product to give, gave staff time, a little bit of corporate philanthropy to help fund goods, and all of it really made a difference. And wanted to ask Shannon Selman from Coca-Cola to speak for a minute about their experience. They contributed product in over 10 states and helped to create an ad campaign for voter information in Georgia. So Shannon, are you with us? Let's see if I can find you here.
I think
she was on here, but she may have gotten disconnected because I don't see her name any longer.
Yeah, we might have lost her. Oh, well, doggone. Well, great. Well, if you see her again, Sarah, let me know, and we can always get back to hearing from Coca-Cola about their experience. So nonetheless, we had all kinds of folks involved, and Burton mentioned some of the work they did there as well. So we heard from the secretaries of state about how appreciated this was. We put together a number of quotes here, but I think just want to highlight how much they appreciated this direct support. And in fact, in one case in Washington, we heard from election officials that in a really tough election year, when things were very negative, there was extreme pressure and a lot of toxicity out there in the world, it just meant so much to them to know that somebody cared and was going to just help do everything they could to get them what they needed. And so on top of really making an impact on voter safety, it was also important to the morale of the many election workers and staffers and poll workers trying to help deliver election that was safe and true. We're also really excited to show you some of the impact that we had with the Get Out the Vote groups. These included such an array of organizations in areas, urban and rural, and states spread all over the country. And again, that appreciation for the goods. And there was a day that we received a note that said, New Mexico was starting to shut down polling places because the coronavirus is surging, and it's because we're short on these kinds of goods. And so we did everything we could to get them what they needed to try to keep some polling places open, and especially make sure they were able to operate on election day when most people were going to be coming through. So this really had an impact. And so again, thanks to everybody who participated. It was an all hands on deck effort and really came through. But we're not done. We well wish we were, but there's still more to do because the election is still happening. So Richard, how about you tell us a little bit about what we're doing in Georgia?
Yeah, so as you all probably know, Georgia has a special election runoff for its 2 Senate seats on January 5th. And that came about because neither candidate in either race in the Senate secured more than 50% of the vote. So that automatically triggered another election. So in Georgia, again, as you probably have been following, it's become, a particularly cantankerous situation. And turnout is expected to be quite high, and the scrutiny is going to be also quite high. And so the stakes for all candidates, the 2 Republican and the 2 Democratic candidates, is quite high. So everybody's probably going to drive, as much voter turnout as possible. And we understand from the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, that there remains a need for various PPE. So what we've been working on with our colleagues at Georgia Voting Works, and Betsy's on the phone with us today, is to secure additional drop boxes. Now, the ballot drop boxes, anecdotally, we know really help turnout. And in a number of counties, particularly rural counties, where people might have to drive a ways, and in urban counties where people might have to be exposed to the possibility of getting COVID, ballot box drop boxes in November proved really important to encouraging people to go out and vote and not have to stand in a line. So these ballot boxes, we're trying to secure about 50 of them. And right now we've been able to raise funds for 25 thus far. They cost about $2,200. So any of you on the phone, if you have funds left in your 2020 budget and would like to do great public service work, we'd be happy to talk to you about how you could actually buy and donate a drop box, which would be used in this election and subsequent elections. Face masks, there's a huge need, and I see that Scott Henderson is on the phone from Doing Good Works in California, and Scott's organization contributed, I think, up to 80,000 masks across the country, and has pledged a similar number this time for Georgia. So thank you, Scott. Face shields, there's a need for those, will likely come from Anderson Windows and Doors, which is based in Minnesota. Hand sanitizer, we know, is going to come from ECOS and Dr. Bronner. We're looking for other sources of hand sanitizer. Disinfecting wipes will probably come from Home Depot and other companies. And then food and beverages for poll workers. Cliff Bar has made a commitment, again, to keep the poll workers stoked with healthy power bars. So if any of you have an interest in participating in any of this effort, we'd be happy to talk to you. And Betsy, I'll just ask if there's anything you quickly want to add about Georgia that I neglected to say.
No, I think you covered it off pretty clearly. The biggest ask beyond just PPE is just getting the word out to vote early, to take as much pressure off January 5th, so that people aren't standing in line in the cold weather. We're really good at ice and snow in Georgia at the beginning of the year, and COVID rates are continuing to climb. So as much pressure as we can take off of that January 5th date, the better it is for the citizens here. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Good, so that's a wrap on Georgia.
Great, and that's also a wrap on 2020. Thank you all so much for making time. Really appreciate your time today, and wish you all a happy and healthy rest of your December and holiday season. And we will certainly be in touch really soon.